Took a few seconds there. Good morning, folks, and welcome to Wednesday morning, December 16th. Um, Looks like we're in for some snow here in south central Pennsylvania and most of Pennsylvania throughout at least that center and northeast swath, so to speak, up into New England. So wherever you are, you might be getting snow if you're anywhere in that along that path. So my prayers be with you. Be safe. Whew. Why does that always happen? As soon as I start a video, my nose starts to itch. Anyway, I'm Brian. I'm the pastor at Christ United Methodist Church in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. If you're unfamiliar with Waynesboro, we're like 2 miles from the Pennsylvania Maryland border. Uh, just 30 minutes from, not even 30 minutes from Gettysburg in one direction, Chambersburg in a different direction, and Hagerstown, Maryland in a third direction. So that's where we sit. Of course, with Facebook, you could be anywhere and you're watching us, and thank you for that. Today is December 16th, so we started reading Luke on December 1st, and we're going to finish on December 24th because there are 24 chapters in the Gospel of Luke, Luke's biography of Jesus. And so today we are on chapter 16. After today, we'll be two-thirds of the way done. Of course, that means that Christmas is just over a week away. 1 week tomorrow is Christmas Eve, and then obviously 1 week from Friday would be Christmas Day itself. Lots of opportunities to be in worship during this last week of Advent, during this last time building up to Christmas Eve. Of course, we have our Sunday worship at 10:45 right here online on Facebook. 7 o'clock Monday night, we'll be leading a Blue Christmas worship experience where we address some of the losses that you might have experienced throughout the year or throughout the years, and acknowledge that's okay to be blue, to be sad at this time of year, and yet filled with joy at the same time. Um, that's at seven. Like I said, that's at 7 o'clock, and also will be right here on Facebook. Coming from the basement of my home, I'm going to be working from home that day. Christmas Eve, 4:30, will be the children's or family program, whichever way you want to refer to that, which will be pre-recorded. That'll be a video, but it will be uploaded, and we'll go here at 4:30. So anytime after 4:30, you'll be able to watch that one. Probably that's going to be a relatively brief worship experience, about 20 minutes or so. Not super long, but good time to spend with the family, I believe. Got a puppet play. We have animation. We have songs. So we got just about everything in that service for you, that experience. And then at 9:30 on Christmas Eve, will be our regular candlelight Christmas with communion. And yes, that will be right here on Facebook, and that will be live streamed. There are pieces of it that will be pre-recorded but blended right into the worship experience. You might not even notice if you weren't looking for that fact. Um, we will be actually starting that experience early, about quarter after 9, with an absolutely amazing, I think it is anyway, sand art video that Reverend Gary Shockley created and gave us permission to use. We've added music over top of it. Cindy Yettens, one of the organist here at Christ, recorded some music, and we were able to put that over top of the video. And that'll be starting at quarter after 9. It's like 15 minutes long. It's a very artistic way of hearing and experiencing the Christmas story. Wow, that was a lot of announcements, I know, but thank you for bearing with me. And now let's get into it, shall we? Today is December 16th, so it's chapter 16. I think I've mentioned this to you, and if not, I apologize. But Luke has a couple uh, key elements, main points that he keeps coming back to, themes in his gospel. He has a theme about greed. He doesn't like greed. So he comes back to greed a lot. Jesus talks a lot about money in the Gospel of Luke, and the other another main theme for Luke is women and the treatment of women. And so chapter 16, he not that he ever drifts far from those points, those themes. The chapter 16 definitely comes right back on track with that, starting with greed. And so let's get into it, and you'll hear it. I'm sure you'll catch on to it. And he starts with the parable. Jesus also said to the disciples, a certain rich man heard that his household manager was wasting his estate. He called the manager in and said to him, what is this I hear about you? Give me a report of your administration because you can no longer serve me as my manager. The household manager said to himself, what will I do now that my master is firing me as his manager? I'm not strong enough to dig and too proud to beg. I know what I'll do so that when I am removed from my management position, people will welcome me into their houses. One by one, the manager sent for each person who owed his master money. He said to the first, how much do you owe my master? He said, 900 gallons of olive oil. The manager said to him, take your contract, sit down quickly and write 450 gallons. Then the manager said to another, how much do you owe? He said, 1,000 bushels of wheat. He said, take your contract and write 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he acted cleverly. People who belong to this world are more clever in dealing with their peers than are people who belong to the light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to make friends for yourself, so that when it's gone, you will be welcomed into the eternal homes. Pause for more than just a couple seconds here, too. Maybe I should have paused several times along the way, but I'm going to hit you with all of it at one time, I guess, instead. The manager is being described right off the bat is described as dishonest. And when he is confronted his boss, by the landlord, the landowner, he never he doesn't deny it. He doesn't deny being dishonest. So if we remember from yesterday the story of the lost son and how he wasted everything, this is a similar situation. The man has wasted, and it's not his money, it's somebody else's money, somebody else's estate. He's been dishonest with it. However, he is commended by Jesus at the end of the parable, not for being dishonest. He is commended for being clever. There is a difference there. Uh, he's not being commended for being dishonest. He's being commended for being clever, for using money wisely. Let's continue on that story, on that idea that I'm talking about. Luke uses when he's confronted by his manager, by his boss, and he's threatened with being fired. The guy asks a question that's very Lucan in nature. He says, "What will I do? What will I do?" You might remember from a few chapters ago, don't even remember exactly how many myself, but maybe the story will remind you about the real rich man who kept getting richer, and he said, what will I do with all my stuff? And he said, I'm going to build bigger barns and store up even more for myself. That was the point of that one. He kept hoarding and getting it for himself. And God called him a fool for doing that. Whereas this guy is very cleverly, and yes, no, it's correctly, it's not his money, it's somebody else's money, but he's being very clever with money that's under his control and his care by giving it away, by helping somebody else. He's in a position where he can help people who cannot pay back their debts, make things more livable and stuff for them. And in so doing, earning their kindness, their generosity in return. So He is not a fool as the other rich man was. He is clever. He was dishonest to start with, never denied that, but he was clever. And yes, Jesus is also making a comparison because he is using stuff that's not his. But this was addressed, I'm sure, to not only to his disciples but also to his Pharisees, um, who aren't using God's things properly. And everything that we have truly is a gift from God. And Jesus is saying that as well. The money you have isn't yours; it's God's, and don't be trying to hoard onto it. You know, I was struck this morning. This might be a little bit of an aside, but I wish I could remember her first name, but it was Scott. Was her last name? She's the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos, and she's worth like $63 billion and has earned, I don't remember how many more billions of dollars this year because of things, and she still has some stock in Amazon and still gets some money from that. Um, but she just gave away $4.2 billion to a bunch of charities. She has actually hired people to give away her money. She said, because by herself, she said, I can't give it away fast enough. I need help giving away my money. And then she also said this. She said, I'm going to keep doing this until the safe is empty. Wow, that is a very clever use. So let's continue here. And although this sounds like it's the same as what we were just talking about, there is a difference, and we'll talk about that. Jesus says, whoever is faithful with little is also faithful with much, and the one who is dishonest with little is also dishonest with much. If you haven't been faithful with worldly wealth, you will trust who will trust you with true riches? If you haven't been faithful with someone else's property, who will give you your own? No household servant can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be loyal to the one and have contempt for the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Pause. Um, so, again, Jesus here talks about being dishonest. Remember, the dishonest servant wasn't commended for being dishonest. He was commended for being clever. But here, Jesus is specifically talking just about being dishonest, and with what, with somebody else's property. So he's being very clear, and I think in this passage even more clear who he's talking about and what he's talking about, that all things belong to God, and how you deal with your riches, your quote unquote riches, truly reflects how you deal with God. And it is that whole uh, greed, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil thing, coming back again and again. Continuing. The Pharisees, who were money lovers, heard all this and sneered at Jesus. He said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves before other people, but God knows your hearts. What is highly valued by people is deeply offensive to God. Until John, there was only the law and the prophets. Since then, the good news of God's kingdom is preached, and everyone is urged to enter it. It's easier for heaven and earth to pass away than for the smallest stroke of a pen in the law to drop out. Any man who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery, and a man who marries a woman divorced from her husband commits adultery. Pause. So Jesus is continuing this theme of greed, and the Pharisees are specifically being called lovers of money. But what the world loves isn't what God loves, is what Jesus says there as well. He's talking about the law and the prophets, and that nothing's going to change. He's condemning them for not. Perhaps they're following the letter of the law, but they're not following the spirit, and they're picking and choosing some things. They're not taking care of the poor and the the poor and the aliens living among you and the widows and children and all that. And then we get into back into Luke's theme about women, which starts right from the very beginning um, of Luke, with Mary's call to be a prophet, with her being called blessed, and with, in particular, her Magnificat, in which she says about the lowly being raised up, the poor being fed, and all that taking place, and the rich being cast down. That reversal of fortunes, so to speak. Um, so in calling Mary, Luke is setting up right off the bat. Women are important, and talking about the lowly and the poor, a lot of whom were women, and that's where we get to in this passage about divorce. Because, well, yeah, I could preach 5 different sermons at least on those couple verses. First thing to keep in mind is that a marriage in first century Judea is not the same as a marriage today. When people talk about, oh, we want a biblical marriage, I don't want a biblical marriage, because biblical marriages were arranged and they were property transactions. One man selling his daughter to another man, selling his property, a woman, to another man. And then she became his property until he died. However, a man could divorce his wife. She couldn't divorce him, but he could divorce her. We could tell by the language in this passage that Jesus, Luke is writing that Jesus is specifically talking to men. Husbands, don't divorce your wives and try to marry another. It keeps coming back to that. It's very male oriented in this because only the men could divorce their wives, and a divorce was different than it is today. That's only part of the reason why, because only men could divorce. And also in the language, it doesn't sound like the divorce is where the problem is. The problem is the remarriage after it. Jesus seems to be addressing what we can presume anyway, and there is at least some evidence for it, that at the time they were getting a habit of marrying and divorcing, marrying and divorcing, marrying and divorcing, looking for what we might call the perfect trophy wife. Meanwhile, the woman has very limited opportunities because once she's been sold by her father, he doesn't have to take her back. So, in divorcing a woman, a man may very well be forcing her into prostitution and into begging. Very limited employment opportunities, and dad doesn't have to take her back. She's not my problem anymore. You're on your own, kid. Um, so the legal custom at the time, oh, she burned the pot roast. I'm divorcing her, and I'm going to look for a better cook. I'm going to look for my perfect trophy wife. Jesus is condemning this kind of behavior. Jesus is condemning this kind of behavior, mostly because of the social status of women. Continuing in the reading, this is verse 19. I've been talking a lot. Good thing this is a relatively short chapter. This is the last section, the last story. But verse 19. There was a certain rich man who clothed himself in purple and fine linen. I should pause there because purple and fine linen would be the clothes of, that's regal clothing. That's the clothing of a king. Doesn't say that this man is a king, just says he's a rich man. So he's setting himself up as king. Setting himself up as king, dressing in purple and fine linen, expensive clothes. I mean, whatever, $5,000 Armani suit is nothing compared to what this guy was putting on. So there was a certain rich man who clothed himself in purple and fine linen and feasted luxuriously every day. At the gate lay a certain poor man named Lazarus, who was covered with sores. Lazarus longed to eat the crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. Instead, dogs would come and lick his sores. The poor man died and was carried by angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. While being tormented in the place of the dead, pause just a moment, or a brief aside. Remember, it's a place of the dead. Get the image of hell out of your mind. And if you've seen the movie Godspell and their take on this, get those uh, horned demons and pitchforks and fire out of your head. Although they do mention fire here in a minute, we'll talk about that too. While being tormented in the place of the dead, he looked up and saw Abraham at a distance with Lazarus at his side. He shouted, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me. Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue because I'm suffering in this flame." Pause. Yes, it does talk about flame. Remember when I talked about Gehenna, hell, as we translate hell, was really the valley of Hinnom, and it's a place that's constantly burning. It's the trash heap. It's the dump. It's a place you get thrown away. And the place of the dead is really just that. And what truly is torment? Being separated from God, in my mind. But notice here, um, even even after death, and even though this guy is in torment, uh, presumably because of his behavior on Earth, his mentality hasn't changed. He still sees Lazarus as something less than him, someone to obey his bidding and serve him. And serve him. That's how he got in trouble in the first place. But he's not changing. He's not changing. But Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your life you received good things, whereas Lazarus received terrible things. Now Lazarus is being comforted, and you are in great pain. Moreover, a great crevasse has been fixed between us and you. Those who wish to cross over from here to you cannot, neither can anyone cross from there to us." Pause. Yeah, lots in here. We're not going to talk about it all. But Abraham's words to the rich man, "Child, don't you remember when you were alive, you had all kinds of good things." And it sounds like he's being nice, but at the same time, he's being pointed with it. The fact that, because he's pointing out the contrast with Lazarus, whom you knew, whom you saw virtually every day, but you didn't do anything, even though those words aren't stated, they're implied in what Abraham is saying to the rich man. You had all kind of good stuff. This guy didn't. So almost sounds like he's saying, you made your bed, you're going to lie in it. The rich man said, "Then I beg you, father, send Lazarus," still thinking of him as a servant, someone less than him, someone less than who? Everybody else, right? "To my father's house. I have 5 brothers. He needs to warn them so that they don't come to this place of agony." Pause. So again, you saw that, right? He's still treating him as a servant, even though Abraham has now told him, about his behavior, and that's why you're in the fix you're in. Nothing's changing in this man. Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. They must listen to them." Pause, because what did I just say about Jesus mentioning the prophets and Moses? All the rules that say, it's about taking care of each other. They must listen to them. The rich man said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will change their hearts and lives." Abraham said, "If they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, then neither will they be persuaded if someone rises from the dead." End chapter. And yes, uh, that is a warning to the early church, to those listening, to those reading Luke's writing, about listening to the one who did rise from the dead. And we should take that warning to heart as well, and not be like the rich man, not be like the rich in many of these stories, but to be like the rich who do give away money. Well, folks, thank you for joining me this morning, Wednesday, the 16th of December. Stay warm, stay safe, And if you're in one of these areas that's going to get hit with snow, do your best to stay off the roads. My goodness, sounds like it's going to be pretty nasty later. So watch Christmas movies, Christmas Vacation, White Christmas, stuff like that, and drink hot chocolate. And have a blessed day. Bye.